couple of years ago, we took a look at the MG ZST. That car, while it wasn't really the best, nor the best in its class, it was a bestseller because it provided great value for money. But did you know that you can also get the MG ZS or the ZST in a pure electric vehicle form? And this is that right here. This is the 2024 MG ZS EV. And in this video, let's see if this car is any value for money too, just like the MG ZS and the ZST, and if it is any good in general. Let's explore the exterior of the MG ZS EV first. So since it's basically just an MG ZS or ZST that's turned electric, changes are pretty minimal and they look pretty similar. Here at the front, the biggest change would be the lack of a grille, because you don't really need the grille. You don't need airflow for an electric vehicle. Instead, you have this huge solid panel right here. Also, your charging port is located here at the front. So if you have a smaller garage with the plug at the outlet at the front, this is a lot more convenient. So this uses a Type 2 or a CCS2. Yeah, very easy to find here in the Philippines. Now, for range, we'll talk about that later. First off, the lighting assembly, yes, very nice looking, very sleek looking, just like the MG ZS. You have that snake light DRLs, and you also get LED headlamp. Now, for the side of the vehicle, you get 17-inch rims, and the only change right here would be you're getting wheel covers now to make it a little bit more aerodynamic, which should in turn increase your range a little bit. But aside from that, this entire side profile, well, it's just basically an MG ZS or ZST. For the rear of the MG ZS EV, changes are also very minimal. The biggest change right here would be the bumper, because since you don't really need a tailpipe, there is absolutely no cutouts for tailpipes right here. Once you open up this tailgate though, you'll see that storage space, it isn't exactly the largest, but it's about right for its class. However, if you do need extra storage, you can still fold down those rear seats 60/40. And if you're wondering if a full set of golf clubs will fit right here horizontally, yes, it will. I was able to try it. Now, there is also a false floor, and there's a lot of space under there, but as for why they didn't give you a spare tire, I don't know, beats me. Cost cutting maybe. Now for the powertrain, let's start off with the battery. 51.1 kilowatt hour. Not too bad, right? It's not the biggest, but not too bad overall. This electric powertrain brings about 176 horsepower and 280 newton meters of torque. The claimed range of MG is at 320 kilometers in a single charge. However, based on our testing, usually it's gonna be a lot lower, right? Well, wrong. You can actually get a little bit more than that. Based on our testing, you can do 331 kilometers on a single charge, which truly isn't bad, especially if your daily commute is just within Metro Manila and nearby provinces. Now moving inside the interior, first we check the door. And surprisingly, that doesn't sound too bad. But you know what is a little bit bad? Well, the interior materials. Because while you do get like really thick soft touch materials here by the top of your dashboard, it doesn't feel the most high quality. And on the doors too, you get so much hard touch plastic. Move on over to the center console right here, and yeah, there's a lot of panels that creak. However, the interior, it still is modern enough. You get two screens in here. One is a digital instrument cluster, which is pretty easy to read, and this center touchscreen. It's 10 inches big, not the most responsive out there, but it does come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And while it does get a reverse camera, the quality, well, it's not really high definition, but is it usable? I think it is more than usable. And speaking of usability too, I really like how MG decided to keep physical buttons in here, so you still do get adjustments for your audio volume, you get adjustments for your airspeed as well as the temperature, so it just is pretty easy to use in general. Now we move on over here towards the steering wheel, and my biggest complaint with it is not really the materials they used, although it's not great either, but you can only tilt it but not telescope it. So if you have shorter arms, it's not really an easy reach. There's also a separate knob right here for advanced driver assistance systems, because this car does come with adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, and lane keeping assist too. So not bad, especially for a car of this price, for an EV at least. Now we move back here towards the center, and this is the biggest difference compared to the regular MG ZS. You don't get a regular shifter anymore. You have this rotary shifter, which is honestly pretty easy to use, electronic shifter that is. And you also get like buttons for your driving modes. You get Eco, Normal, Sport, and you also have a button here that says KERS. So this is your kinetic energy recovery system. This adjusts your regenerative braking. You can go from level 1 to level 3, pretty easy to use. You also get a USB-A port, a USB-C port, and a wireless charging pad. Now for the seats, while the leather material on it, or the leatherette material on it, it's also not the most high quality feeling. Surprisingly, the seats, they are pretty comfortable. I really like the thigh support as well as the bolsterings they give you, and it's also power adjustable for the driver's side, while the passenger side gets it manual. On top too, there is a big panoramic sunroof. Now for the rear seats, as usual, the door thud first. Doesn't sound too bad. Okay, so back here, space, well, I wouldn't say it's class leading, but it truly isn't bad for the size of the vehicle. I'm only 5'6", and I'm seated behind my own driving position, and I still have around 8 inches or 9 inches or so of legroom. However, when it comes to headroom, it also comes at a premium. So if you're maybe like 5'10", 5'11", headroom wouldn't be the best right here because of the panoramic sunroof, which did eat into your headroom. But for your toys, you do get a couple of them. So you get 2 air vents, thankfully, instead of just getting 1 or none, as you see in some of the cars in this class. You also get a USB-A port, a USB-C port, and this center armrest, which is pretty thick and also comes with 2 cup holders. Now, seating 3 people abreast, is it doable? Well, I would say yes, although the car isn't exactly the widest. If you kind of cram a 3rd person in here for shorter journeys, they will be fine, because the center transmission tunnel, since it is an electric vehicle, is virtually non-existent. There's only about a ½ inch or so of a lip right there. Yeah, very comfortable for shorter journeys. So now we drive the MG ZS EV, and driving this, first of all, is super quiet. It is an electric vehicle after all, so you don't really hear anything that much. But there is a weird electric motor sound, which I know is supposedly normal in electric vehicles because there is still that motor, right? But I don't really get this much of that electric motor sound in most electric vehicles. So it just feels a little bit eerie when you hear it. So I really do suggest that anytime you drive this vehicle, that you play some tunes. You subscribe to Spotify Premium and play some of your tunes just to take off some of that heebie-jeebies, right? But yeah, overall, this car is pretty comfortable. NVH-wise, again, noise, it's not too bad. Even on the highway, you do get a little bit of road noise coming from those tires. Insulation isn't the best in here either, but it's okay. Vibrations wise, there's really no vibrations because there is no internal combustion engine. And for harshness, it's super soft. The suspension is tuned towards the soft side of things, but because probably of the super short wheelbase that it has, it does feel a little bit choppy at times. So you kind of get moved on and jiggled on about when you don't go into a speed bump dead straight, or when there's a couple of potholes there on the road. So yeah, that's something to look out for. You really do get jiggled on about. Not a very comfortable experience, but for, you know, smaller potholes, those minor bumps, it irons it out pretty well because it is really soft. Now, for the power in here, 176 horsepower and 280 newton meters of torque. Supposedly, that is a lot for a car of this size. However, my issue with it is because you have all the batteries, which does add a lot of weight here to the vehicle. It doesn't feel too explosive. You still have some of that slight instant torque feeling because you still don't get gears in here, but it doesn't feel like a rocket ship. That's all I'm trying to say. But is it not fun? Is it not exhilarating, especially if you came from, you know, lesser equipped vehicles? No. It still is pretty decent. It still gives you some sort of exhilaration in here. Now, for handling too, I do think that because of that soft suspension, it does dull out the handling a lot, and it's not exactly the most how do you say this? The most agile vehicle in its class. If you go for the likes of the Geelys or the GACs, those definitely handle a lot better compared to this. But is this the type to make you very car sick as you push it over corners? Not really. It just isn't the best, but it isn't bad overall. However, what I'm not a big fan of is, despite the handling being pretty decent, it's the steering, because I feel that the steering is a little bit too loose in this one. And when you're driving at highway speeds, for example, you find yourself having to correct the wheel a lot. And I mean a lot. So I've driven the Suzuki Jimny, for example, or the Jeep Wrangler. And yes, those make sense that you have to do a lot of steering wheel corrections at speed because those use a recirculating ball. But this one, with its electronic power steering system, it's not supposed to feel that way, but it does. It's a little bit too loose, and there seems to be no way to adjust the steering feel and heaviness here in the ZS EV. Well, unfortunately, the MG ZS EV isn't exactly the best on the highway because of the aforementioned correction in the steering wheel. It is pretty comfortable inside the city because usually a lot of electric vehicles, they tend to be a little bit too jerky inside city speeds. Once you step on the throttle, it's a little bit too sensitive. But for this one, it's pretty easy to modulate, which is really, really surprising, especially since this isn't really some luxury EV. It is pretty much just a budget electric vehicle after all. Unfortunately, though, despite that, you cannot drive this car with a single pedal alone. You cannot come to a complete stop with it, even if you increase the regenerative braking to the highest level. But still, you do feel all of that regenerative braking the higher you go up in those levels, and as you let off the throttle, yes, it will decelerate you, it will give you extra batteries, it will regen all of that. But again, you just cannot come to a complete stop. And finally, I want to talk about the advanced driver assistance systems inside the MG ZS EV. And when you are driving it on the highway, it is surprisingly smooth too. When you drive it inside the city, it is also really smooth in terms of the adaptive cruise control. However, what I find to be a little bit too sensitive is its pedestrian detection and its forward collision warning. Because, I mean, when we drive it here inside Metro Manila, you know, there's a lot of people who just cross out of nowhere, right? And for our standards, it still is pretty far, but for the standards of the ZS EV, it's not. So it keeps alerting you, it keeps warning you that you're about to hit someone. It won't automatically emergency brake you, thankfully, but yeah, it'll keep beeping at you. So yeah, that's the only thing to look out for. So now let's talk about pricing. While the regular MG ZS and ZST costs about 1 million pesos, this MG ZS EV right here costs 1,838,888 pesos. Is it a good car? I would say so far as electric vehicles are concerned, in terms of these budget EVs, it's not bad. It's not the best out there, but if you're just looking for that everyday EV that's also a crossover, yeah, this is something to consider. However, my biggest issue with it is MG's own MG4. Technically, that's not a crossover, but in terms of like ride height and ground clearance, they're not really too far apart. But that car costs so much less than this. So if anything, MG Philippines is using that MG4 and is cannibalizing on the sales of this ZS EV. But then again, if you really want a crossover that's pretty affordable, that's fully electric, and with a decent amount of range, then this car right here truly is one to consider as well.